to animals. My name is Shannon Cutts. I'm an animal intuitive and sensitive, or an animal communicator, as some like to call us, and a Reiki master practitioner here at animallovelanguages.com. And if you're watching the video version of our podcast, then you're seeing Pearl Cutts giving me cute little nose kisses, beaky kisses, because he wants me to put him on his lap, on my lap, and go to sleep. So we are so excited today to launch into season 3, and our inaugural guest is Dr. Judy Morgan. And I am not going to lie, I've already told her this. I am fangirling. It's just, we just have to put it out there and just, get the energy of the excitement out there so we can focus. Not my strong suit when it comes to times like these, but Dr. Morgan, Dr. Judy, super excited to have you. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know you had a huge week last week. Of course, these are pre-recorded, but you are in the middle of developing a course yourself.
Yeah.
And so there's lots going on here, there, and everywhere. And we're just glad that you could join us here at Let's Talk to Animals. Of course, the first 2 seasons of our show have really been 90% focused on animal communication, kind of de-wooing, demystifying the intuitive side of pet care. What does it look like when we're talking to animals? How does it feel? How do you know you're doing it? Can everyone do it? Or is it just reserved for a special few? And, how woo is it? And increasingly not these days. And there's even some science to support it. And there's lots of evidence in subtle ways of how animal communication flows over into other modalities. And for folks like myself who choose to hang out a shingle and go pro and go public with what we do, and often how we do it, of course, I also teach what unfolds within the context of an animal communication session is this what next moment, where we've had the conversation, we've received information from the animal, and they've highlighted some concerns or some needs that they have. And so here for season 3, my focus is to address that what next, because often it requires someone like me reaching into my Rolodex of trusted advisors and experts and professionals in pet health and wellness, and increasingly holistic pet and wellness, and offering my human client some guidance. And so that's why I've invited Dr. Judy. I'm a little intimidated even by my own questions for you today, because there's so much we could cover.
There is.
But first, there really, really is. And, first, before we even launch into those, and there's some very specific questions that are informed by the kinds of conversations I have every day with my pet parent clients and some of the needs that come up quite frequently in my pet clients. But first, I'd love it if you would just give us a brief introduction. Of course, it's drjudymorgan.com, assuming anyone who's listening doesn't already know this and know how to find you. But just share, you've got some amazing books, and just share a little bit about your background and your passion for what you do.
Well, I realized when I was about 13 years old that I wanted to be a veterinarian, and it became a single-minded focus, and there really was no other option. So if I didn't get into veterinary school, I don't know what I would be doing right now.
Gotcha.
Because there was no other option. Med school was out. I hate the sight of human blood. I pass out. I vomit. I'm not good. So, so there was no other option, and luckily I did get in. And I went to school in the Midwest, veterinary college in the Midwest. I'm originally from New Jersey. And so we didn't talk about anything holistic or anything, woo-woo, especially back in the 80s, we were just everything very traditional. And I was in practice for about 10 years doing traditional medicine, and frankly, not liking my job a whole lot. I just was not very satisfied. And I accidentally took a chiropractic course in the it was accidental, like truly was. I thought I was going for something else, and then when I got there, about an hour in, I'm like, I think they're talking about chiropractic. I don't know this. So it's life puts things in your path the way that they're supposed to happen. So I stayed for the rest of the course, and then started using it in my practice and realized how powerful it was, and then felt bad that I hadn't been using this for the last 10 years. And really having to cry and apologize in my brain to all the animals that I could have helped that I didn't help because I didn't know how. So once I discovered that, then the path just sort of started winding its way around, and I ended up getting really comfortable with traditional Chinese veterinary medicine, which has 4 branches: acupuncture, herbs, something called Tui Na, which is sort of a chiropractic massage combo, and food therapy. And the food therapy for me was my hot button. It was my reason for existence. We all find out at some point in life, if we are lucky, what our purpose is and what our life's passion is. And so when I hit on that, it was just like, I'm home. And so that's my main focus. But I practiced for 36 years. I graduated 38 years ago, but I practiced for 36 years and sold my practices in November of 2020. And now drjudymorgan.com and drjudyu.com are sites for pet parent education and for holistic pet products, because we've discovered there are so many harmful things that we are doing to our pets, as far as how we're vaccinating them, the food we're feeding them, the chemicals we're putting in and on them, the environmental toxins that they're being exposed to. So our goal at this point, we're a small family-owned company, but our goal is to educate as many people as we can. And I set a goal to change the lives of 10 million pets worldwide for the better. And I think we're doing a pretty good job on that. I mean, we had a post last week that hit 1.5 million. So if we can hit 1.5 million in one discussion, then I think that we're well on our way.
That's just brilliant. And what a 2 thumbs up for setting big goals, and dreaming big and setting big intentions, and the energy and the upflow that comes behind that. It's amazing. I feel like so many of us fail to acknowledge the ripple effect that a single intention can have if we just continue to re-anchor back to it. So, which is super exciting. I have to admit, there's a little part of my, oh, look, a squirrel, that just noticed your adorable dog earrings that you're wearing. So if you're listening to the podcast version of our chat today, you might want to head over to YouTube and check out the bling. But we are going, part of my reason for reaching out to you is very much in service to my human and my pet clients, and some of the reason is really personal, because we are actually going through this process that you just outlined right now, like in real time, with my 7-year-old dachshund Flash Gordon. And my father passed last year, and I moved in with my mom after she had a really catastrophic fall, and by default became the co-parent for Flash Gordon, who was a standard wire-haired dachshund who had been eating a lot of kibble and had been really kind of just been really, we love our traditional vet in the sense of he has integrity with how he works and the way he set his practice up, but there are some things that really don't work for me. And that includes putting a lot of toxic products on him, continually recommending foods that we're not serving him. Now we've managed to transition him over to a fresh diet. I've used a lot of your material to kind of inform that. We've got him with a local acupuncturist and chiropractic rehab clinic, a holistic vet. And so I really want to start our conversation today talking about food as therapy, because while I can't boil an egg, I can't fill a water pitcher without screwing something up in the kitchen. I just get too distracted. But when food is therapy, as someone who has a 2 decades long battle with an eating disorder, I mean, there's no truer statement in the world. That one phrase saved my life when I was able to make that switch. Wait a minute, food is gas for my car, food is fuel for my body. But so often we get blindsided by slick marketing with our pets. And I really believe, as I have these conversations time and time again with my clients, that the hearts are there in the right place. It's the knowledge that's lacking. So I really wanted you to share more about what that looks like, and just some basic recommendations for folks. It's so much easier for me to say, go listen to this podcast with Dr. Judy, than take my word for it, because I have a degree in marketing and business. It's like, I'm not listening to you. So I'd love to start there if you're game.
Sure. So one of the problems is that the big pet food companies are candy companies. They're human food companies, and they figured out that pet food's a big market. And unfortunately, big pet food companies are kind of the repository for the waste products from the human food industry. So, for instance, there was a great post that just came out about aflatoxins, which are mold toxins in corn. Corn is the number one ingredient used in pet food, which is ridiculous because our cats are obligate carnivores. They need a meat-based diet, and cats and dogs, neither one have a requirement at all based on AFCO and NRC requirements that list the requirements for nutrition for our pets. There's zero requirement for carbohydrates. So why is corn the number one ingredient in pet food? Oh, because it's cheap. And guess which corn goes into the pet food? It's graded, grade number 1, grade number 2. Well, the pets are not getting 1 and 2. They're probably getting 5 and 6. And that's where the molds are going to be found. That's where the broken kernels are. That's where the worst of the worst. And there was an article stating that there are 10, it was either 10,000 or 100,000 cases of liver cancer in people every year, secondary to aflatoxins, which are mold toxins found on grains and legumes. It's a huge carcinogen. We know it's a huge carcinogen for our pets as well, but our pets get a much higher concentration of molds in the feed. And one of the horrible myths that has been perpetuated by veterinarians and big pet food companies is that you should just take this dry cereal product, basically, dump it in the bowl, never vary from that, put the same thing in the bowl day in and day out. Well, when we do that, if there's something toxic in that pet food, molds, euthanasia solution, other carcinogens that are used as preservatives, high salt, high sugar, we're putting that in the bowl day in and day out, and we are accumulating those toxins. They don't leave the body immediately. A lot of those are stored in fat. They stay there for long periods of time. So when you're feeding the same thing day in and day out, if there's a vitamin overdose in there, they're going to die. If there's a vitamin deficiency in there, they're going to die because you're magnifying it. So one of the things that I promote very heavily is one, fresh feeding, because we don't want to feed dead food. When you're feeding something that's coming out of a bag, like a kibble is made by a process called extrusion, which is at very, very high heat. When we cook things at really high heat, we kind of kill the nutrition in it.
Yeah.
Because the nutrition is so cooked out of the food, and it's not great nutrition to begin with because it's very high carbohydrate content. Then the food, it goes through this extrusion process at high heat, then it is sprayed with fats to make it palatable. Otherwise, our dogs and cats would never touch it. They'd be like, bleh, right, bland, it doesn't have any taste. So we spray it with fats, and we also add synthetic vitamin mineral mixes because we've cooked everything out of it. We have to add that back in. Well, a couple of years ago, somebody did a tiny math error in the vitamin D. They multiplied it by 10 times or 100 times, whatever, but it was so much vitamin D that it was causing kidney failure and killing pets. Tens of thousands of pets died because there was a math error, and it was across many pet food companies because there's only a couple of suppliers of those vitamin mineral mixes. Nobody tested the vitamin mineral mixes before they used them. On their websites, they talk a big game about, oh, we test all the ingredients and we make sure. Doesn't happen. So it took tens of thousands of deaths before somebody raised a red flag and say, hey, why are we suddenly getting all these animals that are having problems? Why do we have all these kidney failure cases? Why do we have all these animals dying of kidney failure? And then somebody started testing. I guess one of the things that we could say was lucky about that whole thing is that one of the companies that had huge problems with that happened to be one of the prescription diet companies. So they were veterinary diets being sold by veterinarians, which means that all of a sudden the things started to click. Like the veterinarians were going, I've got all these animals on this prescription diet and I've got all these animals in kidney failure suddenly. Maybe I should ask some questions. So we really don't want to be feeding our pets that way. We don't want to feed them dead food. We don't want to feed them foods that are sprayed with fats that are going to become rancid after 3 weeks of storage. We don't want to be feeding them synthetic vitamins and minerals. Think how you would feel if every meal that you ever ate came out of a processed package, whether it's, fast food from a fast food restaurant or frozen dinners that are preserved with a lot of salt. That's why we have so many, high blood pressure problems,
Yeah.
obesity, because there's a lot of salt in their food, a lot of sugar, because those are great preservatives. And then you can say all natural, because salt and sugar are all natural. They're just not good for us in large amounts. So when we feed our pets that way, we get the same problems. We get obesity, we get high blood pressure, we get the same kinds of problems. Luckily, they don't get coronary artery disease like we do, so that's one good thing. But we are seeing a lot of problems. Meanwhile, if we put real food, fresh food, there's no such thing as people food. It's just food. Yet your veterinarian will say, don't ever give them people food. Don't give them table scraps. Well, if you're having a salad, give your dog a salad. It'll be fine. You can avoid the dressing for them. They don't need the dressing. Neither do we. But if you're putting like a healthy olive oil on it, let them have it. It's healthy for them. What's healthy for us, there's a few things: grapes, raisins, onions, avoid those. But for the most part, if it's healthy for us, it's going to be healthy for them. And that's what we need to be putting in the bowls. So for people who are just like, like you, I can't cook. My old office manager used to store her purses in her oven. She's like, I don't have much storage space. I have a lot of purses and I don't cook. So she put her purses in the oven. Okay. Then my next office manager after that had shoes in her oven. So, whatever.
And CDs.
Okay.
Yeah.
CDs.
I'm a musician, so I stored my CDs in my oven.
I guess if you don't cook, it is an extra storage space. So yeah. I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
My dishwasher in my RV, I've never used it because my plates are too big to fit in the dishwasher in the RV, and it's stupid that I have a dishwasher in an RV. Talk about glamping. But I use it for storage because I've never run the dishwasher, so I get it. I understand. And I do consultations for diet for people all the time, and I do get people who say, look, I can't even boil water. I had one woman that I was talking to, she's an older woman, lived by herself, and she wanted to put her dog on a fresh food diet. And I said, well, I can make up a couple recipes for you. And she said, I don't know how to turn my oven on.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, well, that might be a problem.
Yeah.
And she said, I can probably have my neighbor come show me how. And I just kind of went, I said, you know what? We're not going to go there. Like, she was older than me, and I'm like, and she lived alone. And I said, you know what? We're not going to start this process.
Yeah. We're not going to start a fire.
Turn on your oven at this point in life. So I said, when you feed your dog, like she was saying, well, I share my chicken or I share my vegetables with the dog. And I said, well, where would that be coming from? And she said, well, I get things that I just have to reheat in the microwave. And I said, if I can find you TV dinners for dogs that are fresh human food, could you do that? And she was ecstatic. So I found there's a couple of companies now that make these fresh food options where, you open it up and you can see the things that are in there. So you know what's in there. A lot of those have a little more carb in them than what I would feed my own dogs. But for somebody like that, who was moving away from a kibble to a fresh food diet, this was such a huge step up. And for her to just have to warm it up in her microwave or however she wanted to warm it up, I was fine with that. I'm not a huge fan of microwaving our food, but at that point I was like, I don't want you to burn your house down.
Yeah.
Just warm up the food.
That would be even worse for the dog.
Yeah. So, for people who say, look, I don't know how to cook, I don't have time to cook, I've got, kids and a job and a spouse, and I can't. I get it. A lot of the food that I buy for my pets, it's all fresh food, whole food. A lot of it is pre-made. I feed raw, so raw or gently cooked. I've been known to make my own. At one point, we had 10 dogs, and on Sunday afternoon, we would grind 150 pounds of food and package it up and put it in the freezer, and it would last 2 weeks. So twice a month, 3 hours, done. Wasn't a bad deal. But some people don't have that time. If you've got kids that have a million events on the weekends, it's hard to find that time. So there are a lot of fresh food companies now coming on the market and having come on the market in the past 5 years or so. And it's actually, frankly, the largest growing segment of the pet food market. And we're so happy to see that.
That's really good. Well, and I really wanted to kind of highlight this because there's also been In the last few years, as this shift has been occurring, it's felt like there have been some concerns, which now feel a little bit ironic. I mean, there was a part of my heart that was shriveling up like a raisin, like a toxic raisin, while you were talking about, just the actual process of creating the kibble and how the intention is just never to give our pets sub food. The intention is to spend the money, do the, and not realizing what we're not getting what we're paying for, essentially. But there's also been this corresponding concern, and I don't know if it's a little bit of marketing ploy or a really genuine thing, that's cropped up as well, about nutritionally deficient fresh food diets or homemade food diets that aren't cutting it for whatever reason. That we actually use, just for my mother is an incredible chef. It must have skipped a generation, but just because I sometimes have to feed too, we have opted into some Dr. Harvey's blends. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about, how you help ease pet parents through the concern that they're somehow gonna leave out something that their animal really needs,
So on our website on drjudymorgan.com, we actually have a ton of recipes that are just free downloads. We also have a superfoods for your dog, which are toppers, things like eggs and blueberries and sardines and pumpkins. So there's a list of superfoods. It's a free download that you can get. My book, The Yin and Yang Nutrition for Dogs, Maximizing Health with Whole Foods, Not Drugs, has about 60 recipes in it. There is a chapter in the back of the book called The Balancing Act. Don't skip that chapter, because the recipes themselves there's only one in there that's completely balanced, and that's Puploaf. The rest of them are not balanced, but they're made for specific disease problems. And then there's a chapter at the end that tells you, how to balance them. We also have a course on Dr. Judy U that's Homemade Dog Food 101. And you can prepare that. There's a bunch of recipes in there, but it also walks you through how to get started. When I first started feeding raw food to my dogs, I had no clue how to do that. So I bought a pre-made product made by another holistic veterinarian who was one of the pioneers in that space 30 years ago. So I started with something that was pre-made until I figured out how to do it. So I made sure that my pets were getting everything that they needed. One of the easy ways to do it is something that you mentioned, the premixes. So there are a lot of companies that make a premix, which is your fruits and veggies and vitamins and minerals, and you just add your own meats. And those meats can be raw or they can be cooked. And then you add an oil. So whether you use olive oil or flaxseed oil or coconut oil or fish oil, I tend to rotate them. But the directions are in there. So you add hot water, let it soak and poof back up, because these are either freeze-dried or dehydrated foods. And let it poof back up, and then add your own meat. So that's kind of an easy way to slide in without having to do a ton of work. But then there are also pre-made human-grade foods that already have the dried meats in there as well. So add hot water, poof, you got a real meal. Those are great for travel. So my motorhome clearly has a kitchen, but sometimes it's just easier. And if I'm staying in a hotel and I'm taking my dogs, I can take a bag of freeze-dried or dehydrated something, and you can always find water. And you can easily get hot water. So it can be really simple to move from kibble to human-grade ingredients. And the labeling requirements for human-grade are really, really strict. So if you're finding something that says human-grade, it's going to be human-grade. They haven't started lying about that yet.
Nice.
Although there was one company that said, so one of the things you have to be careful of is companies on their websites will say USDA inspected. Well, pretty much all the meat that's in pet food is USDA inspected. What they don't say is it's USDA inspected and rejected, because the rejected meats go to pet food. So you want to see USDA inspected and passed, or you want to see that it says human grade, or you want to see that it's made in a human grade facility where there's actually USDA inspectors in the facility. So unfortunately, it comes down to the pet parent having to do the research. Or if you sign up for my newsletter, you'll get the list of foods, processed, already made commercial foods that I'm willing to feed my own pets. And there's an even better list at truthaboutpetfood.com. You'll have to pay something for it, and it can be as little as $10, but it's a donation to Susan Thixton. She has, for the past 11 years, been going to the regulatory meetings for pet food. She is our best consumer advocate. And in order to get on her list, and it's called The List at truthaboutpetfood.com.
Nice.
In order to get on her list, a pet food company has to apply, and they cannot buy their way in, and they have to provide all of the receipts for all of the ingredients that go into their food and show the chain of custody and that it's all human grade. So she's really, really picky and critical. And her list is growing. I think this past year there might have been like 35 companies on there. And not that they're the only companies that are decent, but they're the only companies willing to jump through the hoops to get on the list. And so any pet food companies that come to me and want to work with me on formulation or, getting their product known, I'm like, well, then you got to jump through the list and get through the hoops and get on Susan's list. Because if you're not willing to do that, then don't bother.
Yeah, and that's incredible. And I love the fact that there's a growing number of companies that are opting in, and really behind the scenes, there's a really good chance that the folks that work at these pet food companies have pets and would probably be, and maybe are, somewhat horrified themselves. And it's really about coming back to that heart and realizing, wait a minute, this animal sitting right in front of me that I love so much, there's somebody out there who's buying this product that I'm involved in making, who loves their animal just as much as I love my animal. And it really does shift our consciousness.
When we were at one of the AFCO meetings, which is the American Association of Feed Control Officials, so they kind of make the rules. They don't enforce the rules. FDA is supposed to enforce the rules. But we got a meeting with FDA and CVM, which is the veterinary group, and we asked them what foods they fed their pets, and they wouldn't tell us. They said, well, we have insider information about what's in there, so we won't say. I'm like, you won't even feed your pets this stuff that you're passing.
Yeah. And it's just difficult. It's just difficult and it's interesting though, because it's a little bit more work on the front end, but as I'm listening to you talk, I'm realizing on the back end, the payoff is a healthier pet, which means lower vet bills and fewer stressful nights in the ER. And in fact, that is actually, I didn't mean to do it, but it's kind of a nice segue to my next question for you, because I found you in a roundabout way through one of my animal communication clients who runs a rescue for bulldogs. And she has a list of all of the products that she, like a wish list, like a charity wish list. Like, if you want to support us, you can help. And the PEA supplement was on the list. And that led me back to, I went and searched for that. And that led me to your Facebook, and that led me to a video. I cannot tell you how many times I have sent those links to my pet client, my human clients, my animal communication client, humans, the humans in the mix, not to the vets, and said, take a look at this, because they'll say to me, I want to talk to my animal because I feel like, she's drugged all the time, or he's sluggish and confused and discombobulated, doesn't know what's happening. And I know there's pain there, but I don't want to, knock him over the head with a hammer just to ease the pain. And so, I wanted to bring this up because it crops up. Because so many of the reasons why a human would want to contact someone like me to talk to their animal is because there's something ding, 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 their intuition, or they know there's something going on, there's discomfort. And a lot of times what we find out is, it's progressed beyond this stage. Maybe we can't trace it exactly back to the diet, but these are a lot of times older pets, or pets that have been born with some congenital issues that may have been created by heavy metals or toxins or poor diets or puppy mills or whatever's going on. And so now what we end up with is a pet in pain, and we're in the interventionary mode. And so I wanted to chat with you a little bit about that's one there. And I have had so many of my pet parent clients come back to me and say, thank you so much. That one little shift has helped us so much. And it's not even an animal communication thing. It's about what do we do with the information that we receive? And so could you speak into that a little bit more, some other ways to address when a pet does have pain and there have been some errors, and how do we ease that without just going to the hard drugs? Where would you guide someone?
It's really interesting because on my Facebook Live yesterday, I talked about the fact that there was a study done looking at uh, dogs that are taking non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. And so they looked at dogs that had been on them for 30 days, and they actually put a little camera, that's a little camera in a capsule that they had them swallow, and then it travels through the GI tract, and you can look at all the
Wow.
pictures of the inside of the guts, which is so cool. What they found is 83% of dogs on non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, so those are pain meds, have GI ulceration, ulcers in their GI tract. And the dogs aren't showing us that. The dogs aren't complaining that they have a stomach ache now, but they do. And those ulcers can lead to bleeding, they can lead to perforation and death. And a lot of those nonsteroidals also can lead to kidney failure and liver failure. Before we had so much information, when they first came out, we had dogs dropping dead right and left, kidney failure, liver failure, because we didn't know that those drugs could cause those problems. Actually, one of my technicians, her dog was dead within 2 weeks of kidney failure from the
That's so
first
sorry to hear
nonsteroidal that came out. Because we thought,
that.
oh, this is wonderful. It wasn't so wonderful. So on my website, there's a blog called Treating Arthritis Naturally, and it has links to probably 20 different products and 20 different things that can be done. So acupuncture, chiropractic, cold laser is amazing. Massage, just warming up the muscles. Things like Reiki, craniosacral therapy. There's a lot of energy work that can be done. Physical therapy for these animals is huge. So many things that we can do, but then we have so many plant-based. So there's something called beta sitosterol, which is a plant steroid. It doesn't have any of the side effects of normal, drug steroids, but it has the effects of decreasing inflammation. We have something called PEA, which is a natural plant-based anti-inflammatory as well. I found it originally for my Cavalier King Charles Spaniels. The breed, about 93% of them have something called syringomyelia and Chiari malformation, which are neurologic problems in the brain and spinal cord. So it is huge within the breed, and these dogs end up on pain medications like pregabalin and gabapentin, tramadol, steroids, you name it. They're on so many medications, and they're drugged all the time, and they don't feel good, and they are woozy, and they are kind of out of it. So I found the PEA, started using that. My dogs are on, after having my dogs on medications for 10 years, they are not on any medications. They are only on supplements. So we use omega-3 fatty acids. We can use homeopathic arnica. We can use liniments. We can use essential oils. There are so many things out there that we don't have to go to the drugs. And so one of the problems when we're using these drugs have side effects. Now, my father had Parkinson's disease, and my parents are very traditional. My dad was on 30 different medications, and it made me crazy because the side effects were nuts. And every time my mom would bring him home from the doctor and say, well, I got a new prescription, and I'd look it up and I'd say, we're not giving that. Are you kidding? Did you look at the side effects? But, they just were in the mindset of the doctor says this is what we need. This is what we need. And my parents were not willing to allow me to get him off all his meds. I would have loved to, but because there's a lot of things that can be done from a natural standpoint. I'm not against using medication when medication is needed. I've got a dog who is in end-stage heart failure, and he's also in kidney failure, and he also has protein-losing enteropathy. So he's a hospice case. He has multiple terminal illnesses. He is on some medication. He's also on a bunch of supplements, and he's doing really well. I did his lab work 3 weeks ago. It looked terrible. I said, oh my God, he's going to be dead tomorrow. I changed up his routine, had lab work done again yesterday, and I went, look at that. Look at all those things that are normal again. How about that? So we don't have to go to the drugs, and we don't have to use a second drug to treat the side effects of the first drug and a third drug to treat the side effects of those two combined. And we see that wheel that just keeps turning out more medications. And a lot of these medications don't play well together, and you're not told that either. And one of the other things that I'm not happy with in the veterinary industry is that people don't get, when you go get a prescription at the pharmacy and they give you that big sheet of paper that has all the side effects to watch for and when to call your doctor. You don't get that in veterinary medicine. You're lucky if you even get told what it's for, and you don't get told the side effects or what to watch for. And that's a huge problem, because I think, when you see those commercials on TV and they go, side effects may include bleeding, headache,
Hmm.
nausea, vomiting, death.
Right, exactly.
I think that with 3/4 of the drugs that we're handing to our clients for our patients, if we said, by the way, here's a list of side effects to watch for, these are the things that could happen, and at the bottom it says death, I think that pet parents 3/4 of the time would say, you got anything else? Like, I don't think this is so good. But we don't give them that option. So here's my note to pet owners: ask questions. Ask, ask, ask. Ask questions. What is this drug for? What are the potential side effects? My mother was in the hospital and the GI doc prescribed 3 antibiotics. And I said no. And when she came in, I yelled at the nurse, and then when I insisted on seeing the
Yeah.
doctor, who hadn't even examined my mom, but she prescribed
Right.
3 antibiotics. And when
Right.
she came in, I said, do you know the side effects of those drugs? And she said, no. I said, well, I do. And I said, you're not giving them to my mother. If you don't even know what the potential side effects are, you cannot prescribe them. So she looked it up in her little formulary on her phone, and she went, oh.
Yeah. Sorry.
And I said, yeah, we're not going there. So it really is. This is goes for you for your human medications, for your veterinary medications. Ask questions. Look it up. You got your phone with you? Look it up. If they're not going to tell you, look it up. They should know, and they should be able to tell you off the top of their head. But if they don't, look it up. Always ask questions.
It's a really good point because, and that is a really sweet segue into the next question, which is, in many cases, I'm working with a human and they don't feel like they have adequate local resources. They may only have, maybe in rural area, they might have one veterinarian that's even an option. And this especially comes up with exotic pet species, but even in the sense of, do I even have a holistic vet that I can, or maybe the nearest, the closest one is 2 hours away. And then you're not looking necessarily at a choice or high quality, you're just looking at what's locally available. And so it feels like it's just getting so overwhelming that sometimes my clients just feel like I'm getting barraged with information, or this is what's available to me locally, and then I'm in the position of encouraging them to reach out further, and they're already on overwhelm.
Yeah.
So let's say first of all, I love that you said you do consultations. I feel like I have sent several people to you for that purpose, but how does that work when the pet parent really doesn't feel like and they've maybe got something going on, or they're not medically, they're just feeling overwhelmed? And when is it okay to reach out and have a virtual consultation? How much can be done when the practitioner can't see that pet in person? And it feels like more and more, but I would love to get your take on that.
Yeah, so the number of consultation requests that we get is pretty overwhelming.
I don't doubt it.
So I think we have a team of about 6 holistic veterinarians that
Fantastic.
we are using in our referral base. And they're people that I know and I've met and that I feel comfortable with their information. And some of them are like me, they're not in practice anymore, but they still want to help. One of the things that we require is you have to have a local veterinarian that you've been working with, and you have to require a year of records. Some people give me 10 years of records, and that's fine. But if you aren't working with a local veterinarian, you haven't had diagnostics done, you don't have any vet records, we can't work with you because we don't know what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And so we need eyes on the ground that's doing a physical exam at that end. And we are not allowed to prescribe medication. So I can't make a diagnosis and I can't prescribe medication through a virtual consultation. What I can do is look at what you're feeding and say, okay, well, let's see, we have high liver enzymes. You're feeding a corn-based dry kibble. Probably we've got some aflatoxins in there. Maybe we should move away from that. Let's talk about how we can improve the diet. Let's talk about what food we can use as food therapy to drain the liver or increase the energy of the heart or help with arthritis or help with getting the diabetes regulated, those sorts of things. Another really good resource is my first book, From Needles to Natural.
Which I own. Yeah. And I've got the second one on order from my mom. She's the recipe person. So
Well, From Needles to Natural, I wrote in 2013, and then it was actually released in 2014. So there are some things in there that I would change. Like there are some pet foods that I mentioned in there that I would never feed now. So you have to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. But like the vaccine chapter is like I'm writing a new book, and I'm reusing that vaccine chapter because it's so well written, and the vaccines haven't changed that much, so it talks about all the vaccines available. But my website, again, like if you don't want to spend any money, go to my website. We have blogs on natural flea and tick prevention and avoiding the chemicals. We have blogs, many on heartworm prevention, whether you need it, whether you don't need it. It really depends where you live. We have blogs on treating arthritis naturally. We have blogs on pancreatitis, diabetes. I mean, we try to keep churning out information so that people have a trusted resource that they can go to. Is my stuff a little bit biased toward holistic versus traditional? Yes. But for instance, in the From Needles to Natural book, I tell you what the traditional medications would be used to treat a certain problem. And then I let you know what the side effects of those medications potentially would be. And then maybe we should try this alternative first. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, you can always go back to something that might have side effects. But we really, the average life expectancy of a medium-sized dog, let's, think golden retriever, in the 1970s was 17. It's now 10.
Yeah.
We've cut their life in half.
Yeah.
And that's because we are over vaccinating, we're feeding the wrong things, we're just killing them with all the chemicals. So we need to get back to doing things more naturally. And it's never too late to change. We adopted a puppy mill breeding male Cavalier King Charles Spaniel when he was 8 years old. He came to us with 5 rotten teeth, which fell out pretty quickly. He lived to 19 because even at age 8,
just brilliant.
Yeah, he had horrible arthritis. So his last few years, he had a 4-wheeled cart, but as long as we would pull him along in his little cart, he would, run with his little legs. And he had a love for life, and he lived to 19. And that was starting off with everything wrong for the first 8 years. We had another cocker that we adopted at 14, and he lived to 18. And he had everything done wrong to begin with. He came and he was such a train wreck. So it's never too late to make changes, and you'll see significant changes just by adding fresh food to the bowl. Even if you decide to stay with kibble, if you start adding toppers like eggs and sardines and fresh leafy greens and just some healthy foods, you'll see a difference. Within a few weeks, you'll see enough difference that you'll say, I might take this a step further. And so for those, I'll get back to the rural, you only have one choice for your veterinarian.
Yeah.
So it becomes difficult because you don't want to tick them off. Like if you have to go 2 hours to get to somebody else, you don't want to make them mad. And veterinarians as a whole don't like to be questioned. They've got 8 years of college. They think they know everything, and they do have a lot of knowledge. But they may also be pushing the same kibble in the bowl day in and day out. They're pushing a lot of prescription diets, which, by the way, are a huge moneymaker for the clinics. And if you look at the ingredients on those diets, you'll see that they're really no different from look at the same company, look at their just over-the-counter line. You won't see much difference in the ingredients in the foods.
Yeah.
But yet the price is 3 times more on the prescription diets. So there is no medication in those prescription diets. It's not a medicine. It shouldn't be a prescription. It shouldn't be 3 times the price of other food. There's actually a big lawsuit going on with that right now. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, that should be interesting.
But you can do the same thing yourself. You could, and that's why the Yin and Yang book, because I get tired of having these consultations with people feeding prescription diets because that's what their veterinarians said. For instance, traditional versus holistic veterinarians with kidney failure. Soon as they see the kidney values start to budge at all, going up, they're going to want your pet, dog or cat, to be on a very protein restricted diet. It's not good for them. They die faster. So holistic veterinarians do not restrict protein until the very last stage of kidney failure. So my dog that's in kidney failure or heart failure and has PLE, his protein is probably about 80% of what it was before his lab work a few weeks ago that was so horrible. And even with that, I went from, the 100% level that his protein was down to about 80%. and his values are great. He's feeling great. So, we don't have to restrict them to the point where we're killing them. So there's what I would say to your traditional veterinarian, if that's your only option, if they're telling you that they want you to give a drug to your dog or they want you to use a chemical, instead of blindly saying yes and getting stuck paying $50 for a pill that you don't ever plan on giving, say, you know what, I'd like to do a little bit of research on that. I'm not sure I feel comfortable with that. Can I get back to you on that? And just be nice
That's
about
good.
it. Just say, I'll just get back to you. I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna do a little research. And I mean, how can you argue with that?
Yeah.
And the same with diet. And frankly, there are some veterinarians that if you raw feed your pets, they won't treat them. So you might want to ask, and I hate to tell people to lie, but you might want to ask straight up when you go in, how do you feel about raw feeding for pets? They might have a big sign on their wall that says, we don't believe in that.
Interesting.
But if you're raw feeding your pet and that veterinarian is your only choice and they won't treat your pet if it's raw fed, you might just want to clam up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, you've got to work with
without an option. We took one of that Cocker Spaniel I was talking about, ended up having to have both ear canals removed because they were just so damaged. And when we took him in for surgery, my husband took freeze-dried raw in a baggie and said, all you have to do is add hot water. And they said, is that raw food? And he said, yes, it is. And they went nuts. They made him take it back out of the building. And in order to keep the dog, he had to live in their isolation unit. And anybody who touched the dog had to gown, glove, cap, wear booties. Like they couldn't touch that dog and then touch another dog. They were nuts. Nuts.
That is nuts.
But there's a lot of clinics that are that way. So ask that question first. I'll give you some information.
That's great. It's a great tip. And, it's interesting because so much of this really boils down to interpersonal skills, communication skills. My late father would always approach any potentially confrontational interaction by starting off with, I really need your help with this. And then kind of state the problem. And it would kind of, after 30 years in HR, human resources, he had learned over many, many years how often that open-heartedness and the humility to just say, I just really need your help and need your expertise. And this is kind of what we're working with here, and just kind of try to plow the field, if you will, full of daisies instead of weeds and up front. But it so often does boil down to, just two personalities and finding creative ways to receive what our pets need without compromising our standards or our beliefs in the home for what we feel is right for our pet. Because ultimately, we're the one that's living day in, day out with that animal. We can see the differences in a way that even the trained veterinarian never could.
Right. And one of the problems with homemade pet food, they will pretty much across the board tell you, oh, it's impossible to balance a homemade diet. Well, we know it's very possible to balance a homemade diet, and you don't have to use supplements. You can do it with whole foods. You just need a bunch of ingredients. But the reason they say that is because we aren't taught in veterinary school how to balance a homemade diet. Like, we don't know how to do that. And I only know how to do that because it's my passion and I learned. But veterinarians don't know how. So it's impossible for them, if you gave them your recipe, it would be impossible for them to look at it and say, oh, I know that is completely imbalanced. So it's easier to say, you can't get it right. And
interesting.
They teach you how to do it right. So a lot of veterinarians, when people want to do a consultation with me, the veterinarians are on board. They're like, I don't know how to tell them how to make a homemade diet. This is great. Somebody else do it.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Not everybody is that way, but there are some veterinarians who are like, yeah, I know they want to meet. I know that they want to use homemade food, but I want to make sure that they're feeding food that's going to be appropriate and balanced. So, so you can get, both ends of that with your veterinarian, but really one of the reasons they become defensive is because they don't know how to balance it. So it's a little, they feel a little threatened by that. Like it shows that they don't know everything. And it's okay not to know everything. It's not something that we're taught. We get about an hour of nutrition in 8 years of school. So,
Yeah, it's kind of daunting when you really take a step back and look at everything that a veterinarian has to learn. And I see this a lot with my exotic pets too. It's like they get, if they're lucky, they'll get a few weeks of training in exotic species. And you think about that I mean, just I don't even know where that falls on the side of brave or crazy to even, sometimes they're in a position where they are the only option, and there's this sick animal that's an exotic species, and they try because it's better than nothing. But there are also many, and that's a whole nother podcast. But of course, we're coming up on our time. I want to be respectful of your time as well. But this isn't, and I feel like our last conversation really feeds into this. Of course, I'm an animal communicator, and ultimately this show launched because animals have things that they want to share. And my passion, and my kind of, when I found that intersection of all the craziness, it was like, oh, great, this is finally starting to add up and make some sense. Thank goodness, And so I'm also, I tend to end up in this position where I'm talking with one of my human clients, and they're saying, I don't know how to share what my pet just told you does dovetail with what my intuition has been. Yes, there is something wrong, or yes, there's something going on, and there's a need that is not being met in some way, but I don't know how to incorporate that into when I have these conversations with my vet who maybe doesn't believe, or, it's like how I guess my real question is, do you have any guidance or information to pet carers who have a veterinary team that they literally don't believe in what they probably would call the softer side of pet wellness and care, like things like animal communication, things like Reiki, the stuff I spend my days doing that, on the other end may end up being completely invalidated with one quick trip to the vet. And so, have you seen anything, or do you have any guidance to folks that are in that situation and want to use somebody like me who want to try these new things, but it's like, it almost does feel like what you just shared, you don't want to be without any options.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what? So if you're going to a holistic veterinarian, the chances of them believing in it are better than a traditional veterinarian. I wouldn't hold back on that. I mean, they might look at you like you have 3 heads, but just say, look, my dog told the communicator that he's got pain. So I'm going to tell you a good story. I had a guy I was dating. He was an animal communicator. Wasn't how he started life, and he actually had a brain tumor. And when he got the brain tumor, he started being an animal communicator. Like all of a sudden it hit him. And I think the brain tumor was making wires cross. But he came to my practice with me every day, and he would talk to the animals all day. And at the beginning I was like, I don't know about this.
Right.
And then I was having to tell my clients, like, okay, well, the communicator says. So I was on the other side of the fence trying to tell clients. My best story, this little Shih Tzu client, older woman, been a client forever. The Shih Tzu has horrible skin disease, greasy seborrhea, clumpy, awful. She's there for the skin. I have the dog in the back because I'm getting some blood work. And the communicator says, that dog has bladder stones. I said, it's here for a skin problem. He said, the dog has bladder stones. Now, looking back on it, from a traditional Chinese medicine standpoint, the dog had damp heat. Damp heat makes bladder stones. Damp heat makes greasy skin. I wasn't thinking that way at the time. So he said, go take an x-ray. The dog's got bladder stones. I'm just telling you. He had 0 medical background. None. He was corporate. So retired corporate. So I went and took x-rays, and daggone it, that dog was full of bladder stones. Now I had to go say to the client, the animal communicator just told me your dog has bladder stones, and I took an x-ray and your dog has bladder stones. So, and I said, I'm not going to charge you for the x-ray because I didn't even tell you I was going to do it, but I just figured, if it's negative, then I can go, okay, he didn't know what he's talking about, but it was positive. And then I was like, oh, now I got to go tell her. So, you know what? Never discount what your animal communicator says. I think part of the problem is there's a lot of bad animal communicators. And because of that, people get kind of jaded. Just like, there's good and bad veterinarians, good and bad dentists,
Absolutely.
good and bad everything.
Absolutely.
So, you can also kind of keep it close to your vest, but ask pointed questions to your veterinarian. Like, he seems painful when I pick him up under his bladder. Could we just get an x-ray? Or,
Good.
just like, he just seems kind of irpy burpy after he eats. I feel like he's got some GI distress. Just rephrase it so it's coming from you as
Nice.
being like the most observant owner in the world. Like, I just feel like he's got
I
allergies.
love that. That's really good.
And then just point your veterinarian in the direction for the testing you want. It's amazing how many times I tell people, look, you got to get lab work at least once a year. I'd prefer it twice. And if you have an old dog on a bunch of medications, you got to get it more often. And they'll go in and say to their veterinarian, well, I want lab work. And the veterinarian will go, why? He looks fine to me. And literally will refuse to do it. And I'm like, you're a client standing there with $200 in your hand going, here, take this and get some blood from my dog. And they're going, no. Like, who does that?
But they're willing to push food, a prescription.
Or
It's
they'll
like,
just hand you antibiotics without a diagnosis. And I'm like, so
yeah, interesting.
always push for diagnostics. I'm huge on diagnostics.
Yeah.
I'm huge on natural treatments, but I'm huge on diagnostics, so I know what it is I'm targeting.
Well, we have to have a little, we have to, lay a foundation of information. And that's, it's like, that's part that I always teach my students, in animal communicator, when you're wearing your animal communication hat, you need to know what it's almost like football, which I know almost nothing about, but you need to know if you're the tackle or the one that's carrying the ball. You need to know what hat you're wearing and what your role is. And so I'm in the information gathering role. There's diagnostics, information gathering, but then it's like, what do we do with it? Which is why you're here today and why I'm so delighted that you have shared a whole hour of your time. You've got so much going on, and I'm really excited because you've given me this beautiful resource that I can now share with my clients in perpetuity. And I just want to thank you. I want to thank you all for listening and watching. We treasure you. You're why we do what we do. This show is here to serve you. So if you've enjoyed this episode, please do share it with a friend who loves animals as much as we all do. Please do like, subscribe, review, give 5 stars, give 50 stars if it's in your area. We love that too. Write us questions, requests, future show topics. We love to hear from you. Appreciate it. drjudymorgan.com and drjudyu.com. And she's got amazing books, incredible resources, and consultations. So now you know it, now you have it. And there's another pathway, another gift that you can give to your animal loves to help them have healthier, happier lives. So Dr. Judy, thank you again for being with us. Absolutely grateful and delighted. And you've made my day much brighter, and really just feeling, yeah, okay, the fangirl has come back. She just needs to go. She needs to go sit down in the corner.
Opportunity. I appreciate the opportunity to help spread the word and help more pets stay healthy.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Naturally healthy.
Very well. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Just like, and the more we do for our pets, that inspires us to do more for our own selves as well, because the learning often goes both ways. So please join us again next week. We're going to have another wonderful guest here in our season 3, what to do with the information that you receive and what's next, and how to inform your pet's life with all kinds of new wonderful gifts that are going to make both of you feel much less stressed and much healthier and happier. So bye for now, and we will welcome you back again next week.